Right, let me try to understand the technology. That works very nicely. So my name is Moritz. I run a light studio, or a design studio in London, and we play with light. So our work is in different spheres, like in sculpture, digital art, and sometimes it's also wearable. And in fact, I'm going to start out showing you some wearable projects, and then I'm going to move through things within the space and some more sculptural work. This whole idea of wearables started out with some fashion shows in Paris. Hussein Chalayan famously showed wearable electronics for the very first time on the Paris catwalk, and we helped him enable all of this. And what happened to the studio is that people from the music industry got in touch and wanted to see things like this on stage. And here you can see a couple of collaborations, sort of quite famous clients. There's Bono, will.i.am, Take That, and Rihanna. So we're having good fun once in a while, sort of seeing a little bit what's going on in that industry. This is probably the best job we ever got. We got asked to redesign Jamiroquai. So here you go, the automaton hat for JK. Fully parametric, 3D printed, animated, and well, both physically and in light. So this is about, we threw all our knowledge at this particular project. This was an interesting request from Cirque Du Soleil. They asked us to make a dress that can change color but not use LED. So they said that, oh, LED in clothing has been seen already too many times. We want something new. Can you make it change color in a different way? So it was for a show that had the Mexican theme. So we thought floral patterns would be interesting. And so we designed a blossoming flower module that is covering this whole dress, and we can talk to these flowers in the same way that we can talk to LEDs, which means that we can animate across the surface. This is the very first time when we actually tried it out, like the complete installation. In fact, you can see the dress isn't totally finished there, but it's the best video I have showing the magic of it. So in the final dress, the interior is all covered by fabric, and it's been worn by an opera singer in this traveling show. I'm hoping that this show is coming to London in February. It's a traveling show, and every January, February, Cirque du Soleil are in the Royal Albert Hall, so look out. If it's the Mexican show, then you can see the dress there. Now, sometimes we experiment with photography. I do love photography, and especially playing with light and long exposure. We've done a few projects where we try to kind of find a new angle at this. Obviously, if you go on Instagram, loads of people do long exposure and also beautiful work. So we try to innovate every time a little bit. So in this case, we built a time slice rig with 50 cameras. And we had Ellie Goulding dance with a light stick. And so the result of this is that you can move around this scene that she creates. And it's almost like virtual sculpture, so light sculpture in space using pretty conventional photography. So it's something that looks computer generated, but could have been done, say, maybe in the 70s, if you had addressable LEDs in the 70s. So that's the one technical piece that is utterly modern, I think. Also for this project, we did a little bit of a twist to the brief. We were asked to create an art piece, a sculpture that can be photographed to be used in a billboard campaign by this client. The client is Johnny Walker, and because they have restrictions on advertising, like how they can advertise alcohol, so there had to be an artistic element. So they said, like, yeah, make a sculpture, we'll photograph it and put it on a billboard. So we made an object which is a ring with LEDs around it, and the LEDs are computer controlled. And when you roll the ring on the floor and you do a long exposure photograph, you get this. So it's a little bit different to kind of the normal like light wand where you get all these parallel lines. And here you can see you get a really beautiful crossover by the paths of all the LEDs as they spin and run along the floor, basically. The mathematics behind this was quite challenging, to say the least. In fact, we used Grasshopper to solve this problem. So a tool that comes from the world of architecture, which was never intended, I suppose, to be used in light painting. But that's how we managed to resolve the maths of where and when to switch on the LEDs. Now, quite a few years back, I did a little bit of an experiment with a tiny LED matrix about the size of a postage stamp. And I wanted to see if I would be able to naturally reproduce a candle flame, which I managed to do surprisingly well. It really came out very natural. In fact, when you looked at it from a little bit of a distance, you couldn't distinguish it from a real flame. So then I showed this to Ingo Maurer, and he's like, "Oh, I'm having this. We're putting this in production." And we showed it in Milan with Ingo in 2000, oh God, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Time is running really quickly. So anyway, it made it into the permanent collection in MoMA, and so very successful. It's almost like a design classic in its own right. And then we launched a brand of our own. Oh, hang on, sorry. This is a reduced... we get it running again. So we have our own small brand, and it's called Mori London, and we make custom chandeliers. We also have products like table standing versions of this. So if you're interested in that, look up mori.london or talk to me after the talk. Now here's something a little bit larger in scale. We were invited to design a fashion show. This is a Versace fashion show in Milan. In this case, we got to play with a gigantic space, like almost the size of an aircraft hangar. It's a very nice challenge to sort of go up and down in scale. We very much enjoy that, find new challenges. In this case, we only worked with projection, so all the imagery that you see on the walls is our design. All we had to work with were color swatches from the fashion collection, because the clothing only ever gets finished like the day before the show. The fashion world are like radically last-minute people. It's really quite impressive how they do that and how they deal with that stress factor. So we only ever had colors to play with. So we picked on colors from these clothes and created all this beautiful imagery. Oh, sorry, this is not exactly in the right order. Here you get to see the Mori candles. This slide should have come a little bit earlier, but as I said, we have table standing version in oil lamp and a candle. They're battery operated and rechargeable, so they recharge like a mobile phone. Now, back up in scale, this is a chandelier we did for a hotel in Davos in Switzerland. Like normally people go skiing there. It's a very high-end skiing resort. Only once in a while do they talk politics. So the chandelier is inspired by the winter landscape. It's like a large snowdrift with a blue sky above. Now the blue sky gets generated by the chandelier spheres themselves. So there's a custom LED module in every sphere that projects blue light upwards and white light down. So yeah, the blue sky is generated by the chandelier itself. It's a like nice parametric design, as I say, inspired by snowdrifts, beautiful lines that you get in the snow when the wind has blown through. And here you have a little bit of a close-up of the handmade spheres. Hang on. These are also handmade glass objects, this time for Lasvit in Czech Republic. They asked us to make a modular chandelier, so we designed a single object that it has the profile of a classic chandelier from the side view, but if you look at it from underneath, it's hexagonal. Oh no, sorry. I'm missing a slide here. So that the objects, they lean gently against each other because they are suspended from a single point above. So almost like a bunch of flowers upside down. So there's no need for any structural element to make up this shape. And that's why you get this very gentle curvature underneath. And it can be done in different sizes. So starting from a single element or 7 make up like a hexagonal element, or you can go larger depending on the space you're working in. This is an installation which is interactive. We did this in Milan for Design Week based on modules that are convex mirrors. They are mounted on the wall and they have indirect light behind them. In fact, they have many LEDs that are all individually addressable, so we can play with the halo of light. It's like morphing and shape-shifting, so they are kind of like intelligent pixels that can shape-shift. So we can do a very beautiful liquid animation across this, and we had a camera looking outwards that would react to people going past. This is also a shop window in Milan for Christmas. We got to play with the entire front of the Rinascente building. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's got this column walkway with 8 windows. So we did like a 60-meter installation, it depicts the moment that Santa Claus has just passed through. You know, as we all know, Santa has to travel at an incredible speed, otherwise he can't stick to his timetable. And so you don't really see him, but he throws up a big vortex of snowflakes behind him, and this is what we've designed here. As in nature, no two snowflakes are the same, and in the installation we used parametric algorithms to make sure that all the snowflake outlines would differ from each other. So there's, I don't remember, 1,600 of them in there. So we used like a morphing algorithm that would morph through different shapes. And this again is a Christmas installation, this time in Bicester Village. We're going up in scale here. In fact, we got to do the Christmas lights in Bicester for 2 years in a row now. So here we did Chinese lanterns that are based on the little flame you saw earlier, but within this paper envelope, we installed 1,200 of these in Bicester and another 1,200 in France in their sister village. So really quite gigantic installations, very beautiful and playful, and apparently the most Instagrammed installation they ever had in Bicester. Yeah, you've got another view of that against the sunset. Now, this is the latest and greatest, our last project, and the one that we're probably the most proud of because it presented the biggest challenge on all fronts. So we were invited to work with Bentley for their 100-year anniversary. And to celebrate that, they made a show car. So this is a concept car, a preview of future Bentley designs. This could be a 2035 Bentley, which is electric and can be autonomous if you choose to, but can be driven because Bentley drivers love to drive. All car enthusiasts for sure know that. So we were invited to bring it to life, which means everything that lights up inside and outside the car came from our studio. And this presented a whole vast amount of challenges. First of all, the interaction with the Bentley team themselves. We're quite used to doing our own project, you know, running and managing it. But all of a sudden, we were part of a very big team with many different people having an opinion, and there was a lot of trying to gauge, you know, who to listen to, who to talk to about which problem, etc. So that was the first, I don't want to say problem, but challenge, okay, which we excelled at, and it was good fun because everybody was very enthusiastic. Then technically, there are very complex surfaces in this car, especially if you see the front grille. It's a very, very complex 3D design. We had to put LEDs behind that, and so we developed a design tool that takes parametric 3D design and translates it into CAD design for the electronics industry. So these are two tool chains that never talked to each other in the history of CAD or in the history of mankind. So we had to kind of bring these two worlds together. Then we had to work with different materials on the interior. We have hand-blown glass. We have bogwood, 4,000-year-old wood. We have handcrafted silk that we had to illuminate through. So like all these interfaces were challenging and needed attention for every small aspect of the car. Here you can see an animation running through the front grille. So there are about 4,000 LEDs and they are placed on curved circuit boards. In fact, the electronics industry loves to make many times the same thing, but they hate to do many different things once, okay? So we had to get them to do that for us. So that was probably technically the biggest challenge of the project. Here you can see a video of during the launch, different animation running on the car. on the rear of the car, no, this animation won't show that. Yes, so here you can see. On the rear we had lights going through the paintwork, which was again a challenge in itself because the paintwork had to match the body work. So on the body you paint something that is opaque, whereas on the rear we had to paint a transparent surface, and then the two had to match each other, and then the light had to come through. So like tiny details that take loads of time because the attention to detail is seriously insane on a concept car like that, and at the level that Bentley requires. Right, that's all we have time for. I'm already over time, sorry about that. But if you're interested in these type of projects, there's our Instagram website. Please do get in touch, and well, there we go.